He's talked about lately the need for embracing supply-side reforms. I mean, this is something that Ronald Reagan talked about in the United States during the 1980s. I'm trying to understand this. According to Xi, how would a supply-side strategy work for China?
Well, a supply-side strategy, then when we think of it narrowly, it means too much supply overcapacity in China, so laying off people, shutting down mines and all that. So that's a good thing. It's also a difficult thing to do structurally that will lead to a lot of job losses. So now we're saying 2 to 3 million coal miners are going to lose their job. Reality is China has to create 15 million jobs a year. It has been doing that in the past 5 years, every year creating 15 million. And it's getting harder and harder because businesses themselves are not doing well. So you're losing jobs from all these supply-side reform.
I see two things the Chinese government trying to do to essentially look at supply-side economics or use whatever terminology you use. One thing they do is try to turn the old days of made in China to built by China. That's very consistent with the current policy of one belt, one road. What does that mean?
What's the difference? It seems
there
very
is a difference. The make and build. The make, essentially, you want to take advantage of the low-cost labor, low-skilled labor force to make the cheapest product all over for the world, right? Exporting driven. Built by China is slightly different. It's about actually combine with your financial capital and use your capabilities of building, construction, high-speed train, roads, bridges, and tunnels, and subway stations, and export that capability to the outside world. So I think that these are the differences. Instead of just focusing on very low-end manufacturing to create this kind of opportunity for Chinese economy, but use the excess capacity. We've got a lot of steel, we've got a lot of commodities and a lot of the basic industries, and try to export that through the projects, through the built by China.
But this is the thinking behind One Belt, One Road.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
I think the supply-side reform, the slogan is not going to work. It's misguided. It's like in the last 3 or 4 years, every year we had something new slogan, right?
Yeah.
And a year later, nobody followed up on why you proposed that and it didn't work. And then you suddenly propose something new. So why we should believe in this something new, right? The economy is a system with many parts that are should be balanced. What's wrong with China is imbalance. Basically, the government and strong enterprises just keep sucking resources out of the economy and investing, so creating this massive overcapacity. Then you say a supply-side reform. What do you mean is that really we make the products better? But the real problem is that people have no money to buy from you because you take all the money from the people to build all these factories, and people have no money to buy the stuff you make with these factories. So this is the issue. The real issue is balancing. The investment could not be half of GDP. It's just not possible.
So I disagree that people have no money to buy. I mean, just look at simple statistics. Last year, 2015, Chinese citizens spent overseas purchasing 1.2 to 1.5 trillion RMB. Right? It's not like people don't have money. They actually do demand better services, better products, better brands, and they can't find it in China. Right? China make the lower quality, lower cost products, and if there is a way to turn that into the other direction, I mean, the purchasing power is there.
What's going on now shows that all these people who market themselves as like really capable, always on top of things, now they look clueless.
Vital Signs in association with Dubai Healthcare City.
It's mid-morning outside San Diego, California. On the base of Camp Pendleton, these Marine Corps recruits have been at it for more than 30 hours already, and there's still a long way to go. They are in the middle of the crucible, the infamous final 54 hours of boot camp.
This isn't rest time! We're not taking a rest!
By tomorrow, if they make it through, they will officially be United States Marines. Along the way, and throughout all 11 weeks of their training, they are making new habits and breaking old ones.
Vital Signs in association with Dubai Healthcare City.
China is the world's #2 economy, but it is now posting its weakest growth in 25 years. Steel production fell in 2015 for the first time in 3 decades. And as manufacturing slows, China is relying on a more dangerous growth engine, debt. In January, new debt issued rose to an all-time high, just over $380 billion. Meanwhile, the yuan has struggled against the dollar, and investors have been pulling billions out of the country. China says it's still growing at close to 7%. Independent experts say the real figure is probably half that. One point that we are all in agreement here, the 3 panelists sitting with me at the table, is the lack of direction from the very top. And I want to dig into the reasons behind that. How much is Xi Jinping's war on corruption a factor behind that?
That was a big factor. He was doing the right thing to crack down corruption. That's what's needed in China. That's what the Chinese people support. But in going after the bad guys, he somehow created some unintended factors. So, for example, people working for SOEs, working for governments, are so nervous about their jobs. So every day you have these people being called to tea to nearby hotels as they investigate anyone from CSRC, the stocks regulator, to CITIC Securities. So people are very concerned about their jobs. And secondly, he has come up with these SOE officials and government officials need to have pay cuts. So you're dealing with pay cuts from anywhere from 50% to 20% ordinary people. So the best talent is not going to continue to work for the government.
So there's a vacuum in economic leadership at the top, and there's a chilling effect among those who are still there.
I think this is like philosophically, this is incorrect. China's problem is that the government is too big. Okay, so any time that the government shrinks, it's good news. Why do we need so many government officials? So for China, the real issue is to give money to the people. Okay, so you need to cut taxes. Why should taxes, fiscal revenue rising faster than GDP every year? After 20 years, of course, there's such a big share of the economy is fiscal revenue. So how could the economy work, right? When the government is too big, the economy doesn't work.
Well, but we're seeing the shrinking of the government, but it's politically motivated, right?
Yeah,
and that's when it complicates.
Yeah, but let's be careful though. But when we talk about shrinking the government, you're assuming there's a system in place already. So you minimize the interruptions or by the government. But China has always been run by a huge civil servant machine. It's been running very well. Just simply because borrowing from the Western concept of shrinking the government, minimal interruption. It doesn't work in China, temporarily. Right? So I think before we do that, we actually have to put a system in place. You got to make sure the rules and regulations are there.
I disagree. In the 1920s and 1930s, China didn't even have a meaningful central government. China was really, really prospering. I think the Chinese people are inherently market-oriented people. And the government is strong because it serves the purpose of the government. It serves the interests of the people in the government. They are justifying this strong government-led economy. So this myth, China needs to be led by strong people. I think this is totally wrong. What's going on now shows that all these people who market themselves as like really capable, always on top of things, now they look clueless. They were clueless before. It's just the people didn't know.
I think we can talk about what China should do and what China realistically can do, or we expect China to do. So it's very clear the Communist Party is not going to let go of the power. And Xi, with a strongman attitude, he is actually going to further consolidate power. So if it's a Singapore model, I think the Chinese people are willing to accept it. As long as there is very little corruption, I think the Chinese people would prefer to have a strong government which knows what it's doing to kind of going immediately to the the Western model.
Okay, let's move on. First, let's talk about the Chinese currency. We've seen the China Central Bank has been guiding the currency lower and lower. Why is this happening? Is this because it's truly reflecting the real value of the renminbi, or is it just to make Chinese products more competitive overseas?
I don't think it's very much driving towards exports, because even though Chinese export growth is slowing, China's total trade imbalance, the trade surplus, is hitting a record. So its exporters are doing well. After 10 years of yuan gradually rising, now it does look overvalued, and it continued to peg toward with the US dollar. And you have the Chinese individuals who are eager to move their money out. Part of that is diversification, and part of that Chinese are just so, well, I think every Chinese is a trader by heart. They look at the yuan devalue by 5%. They're like, I have to change that into US dollars, otherwise I'm losing. And I was in Australia early this year. Their currency were falling by 30%. And I asked an average Australian, why are you not changing that into US dollars? They were like, it just means a little bit. Less online shopping. It means a little bit, I would just travel around Australia instead of going to the US. No one was rushing to exchange. But in China, everyone is trying to maximize their quota to buy US dollars and get rid of their yuan. So you have all these forces of capital outflows, and you have the foreign reserve falling from almost 4 trillion about 2 years ago to only 3.2 trillion now. So it's getting concerned, and that all put pressure on the Chinese currency.
Yeah, capital outflows, you've been reporting on this phenomenon very closely, and it's been just fascinating to watch, because for years people were trying to get their money into China, and now we're seeing people manically trying to get their money out of China. When is this going to slow down?
I actually do think the trend will actually continue, probably in a more measured pace, because naturally the Chinese citizens now on one point, I actually do think Chinese citizens actually have a lot of wealth. They actually do have income, and one of the things a lot of them are considering is actually diversification, and because almost all of their wealth is in China, right? Properties, stock market, and then they got burned in the stock market, and not everybody believes in the real estate boom. A lot of them actually do think there's a bubble in the real estate, and so for asset diversification, a lot of people moving a portion of their asset overseas.
What should be the sustainable economic growth model for China, and can China's leaders deliver?
It's going to be painful.
Clinton.
I was so proud to be a New Yorker.
Sanders.
I was born here in New York City.
It all comes down to this. The Brooklyn Democratic Debate. Friday, live, only on CNN.
That river there, that's where he says the ISIS positions are. His mother still doesn't know where he is. There are still areas within this that are booby-trapped.
When I got into the market, everybody made money. People thought even fools can make a profit.
No, it's impossible for the market to bounce back anytime soon. This is like the 8-year war against the Japanese. It may take 8 years for the market to turn around.
I've lost around $16,000. I thought I would make money, but I didn't, because of bad luck or lack of knowledge. I haven't taught my husband yet how much I lost.
Before the stock market rout of last summer, state media were encouraging individual investors to pour your life savings into the markets. And a lot of people did.
Right. Some people got burned.
A lot of people got burned.
Right. At the end of the last year, the market was still up 60%. So you look at the China billionaire list, it was actually much bigger than the previous year because it still created more wealth. I mean, this year it went down more, so more people got burned. And now the interest has gone from stocks to property market.
China's economy is going through this transition phase right now. It's dealing with such a long list of problems, from capital flight, volatile markets, the makings of a property bubble, lack of faith and confidence in the leadership about its handling of the economy, the economic slowdown. Yeah. Wow. I mean, what does this mean for the world? What kind of global impact is this having?
Yeah, I think, from a global perspective, I mean, we have to understand where China come from, right? I mean, I like to use an analogy. It's almost like my teenage son, right? 12 years old, but he's approaching 6 feet tall right now. He looks awkward to the outside world, right? I mean, he looks like an adult, but he doesn't act like an adult. But he has to overcome a lot of issues in today's environment. And the world hasn't helped China either. The global macro environment is terrible, right? So when outside is bad, China itself is facing these growing pains. It's going to be painful. It will take some time. Once they get out the teenage days, and I believe the golden days are way ahead of us.
So you're saying, I mean, this is China's economic adolescence. So to China's top trading partners, to EU, to the US, to big commodity producing nations, please be patient with China.
Yes, and buckle up. There's going to be volatility. There's unpredictable, for those of us who had teenage kids, they're unpredictable, right? And they sometimes do things, we don't understand. But unfortunately, that's where the stage of the development for China is in today.
I think it's arguable whether China is still a teenager or its level of development is already 20-something or 30-something. So I think with where you are in the economic development, I think China was more like 20-something. Politically, China is like a teenager. So it's very new for China to be able to lead in the world in a lot of international organizations, AIIB. That's the first time that China is coming up with an international organization which will have kind of an important role. So politically, it's a little awkward and the world still needs to adjust to it. Economically, there are signs that it's maturing already. So it doesn't really have the super growth of the 10% plus level it had it as a teenager. The reality is there is not another China coming up. So we still have to deal with this China.
Well, I think that it's too late to talk about the impact of China for most people. It's basically commodity prices down 70%. Yeah. We know that people borrow a lot of money to increase the capacity. So what I see is that another financial crisis coming. It's really centered around the commodity space. The other is emerging economies. These economies that were exporting commodities at high prices, they've sensed more borrowing capacity because they felt like I'm going to make more money in the future, so let's borrow some money to spend now. So we've seen $9 trillion of foreign currency corporate debt. So this, there's overlap between these 4, 5 trillion and 9 trillion, but this is where we're going to see thunderstorms coming in the coming years.
Is there any opportunity, trade or investment opportunity in China today? I mean, there is, but what is it?
Well, I mean, as an investor, I actually think we face a pretty unique opportune window looking at investments. Yeah. Because short-term volatility, short-term capital markets, dislocations creates opportunity. And there are things that we like. But what do we really look at, right? As I said earlier, we used to look at where the government direction is. Today, we look at what the consumer demand is, right? And where people want to spend the money. What do the people want? They want better services, more convenience, better goods, and just better life experience. And so the areas that we focus a lot on, I think it's not different from anybody else's, is focusing on the healthcare side, focusing on education side, focusing on the advanced manufacturing side that produce better products.
I agree with the Chinese word 危机, crisis, and opportunity. So if there is discomfort, that creates opportunity for value investors. And I also think that China is not only a country made of 1 billion consumers, China is also a land of entrepreneurs. So you like to think of it as 1 billion entrepreneurs. Everyone wanted to do better for themselves. Well, the new generation, people who are 20 years old, they're slightly different from the generation who are 30s or 40s. When we grew up, China was still poor. So we were hungry because we all have to make it out for ourselves. There is no homes waiting for us. Our parents, our grandparents haven't really bought homes. So we have to do it not only to lift ourselves, but also to live the lives of themselves. So nowadays, it's getting harder because the 20-something, they may not have that kind of eager that they need to make money as our generation. But I'm also quite positive about this new generation because in many ways, they are better. They are better educated, they have seen the world, they are a bit more relaxed about money, but they are increasingly interested in making the world a better place. They seem to be a new generation worth watching. And I think that entrepreneurs' blood, the spirit which come with their parents, grandparents will continue to flow with them.
Okay, so final question for all three of you. What should be the sustainable economic growth model for China, and can China's leaders deliver?
Well, China should be 30% or less investment, and over 60% in consumption, and a growth rate about 5 to 6%. And the government and student enterprise should spend 20% of the money in the economy instead of 50%. So it's very simple. To make a market economy work, it's very simple. It's just that do not do too much. If you do too much, you mess things up. That's what China has been doing. The government wants to do everything.
I think the government knows what's a good model, which is let the consumers and private companies play a bigger role and the state take a back seat. But the reality is, can they actually stick to that? So what we have been seeing is the government trying to do both. On one hand, it's trying to encourage private consumption. On the other hand, it's really hanging on to its power and continue to meddling in the market. So we are likely to see this continue to struggle to play in the market.
Privatize reformed SOEs, and also focus on the new generation. That is the future, the consumption, and then focus on the middle class. Cut taxes.
All right, Liang Meng, Wei Gu, and Andy Xie, thank you for joining me to talk about China's economy in transition. Thank you.
CNN Supercharged. Plug into the first ever all-electric racing series, Formula E. CNN is behind the scenes of every E-Prix weekend. Meet the drivers racing through city street circuits across the globe. And check out the technology driving us all towards a greener future. CNN Supercharged. Tonight on CNN.